We begin, though, with the sentencing of Kim Potter later this morning. The former Minnesota police officer will learn her fate for killing Daunte Wright last year.
Potter was convicted of first and second-degree manslaughter in December for fatally shooting Wright during a traffic stop. Potter said she mistook her handgun for a taser. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen joins us now from Minneapolis. Ron, good morning to you. So today's sentencing could go on for more than a couple hours. Take us through the process. What can we expect, and will she speak?
The most poignant part of this, the most dramatic part of this, will be the victim impact statements by Daunte Wright's mother and father, and perhaps the mother of his 2-year-old child. They testified during the trial, you may recall, and they were very emotional. And what they, of course, keep emphasizing is that their son is dead. He's gone. He's not coming back. There's no way that they see that they're going to get justice, which would mean him coming back. So they are hoping for accountability. And if you think even further back, the family and rights advocates wanted Potter charged with murder. She was charged with first-degree and second-degree manslaughter. So the maximum sentence in this case is 15 years on the books. But the prosecution in their court filings have asked for 7 years, essentially, which is what the sentencing guidelines for this type of crime suggest. So that's what we expect from that side. From the defense, yes, we may hear from Potter herself. You'll recall she testified during the trial, and she was very emotional, very remorseful. Some observers didn't quite feel a lot of sympathy for her because she's a 26-year police veteran who essentially says that she mistook her weapon for a taser, something that she'd been trained about for many, many years. So we expect to hear perhaps from her and from supporters of hers who we believe have submitted letters to the court talking about how good and decent a person she is. She's a mother, she's married, she has ties to this community, and they are going to, the defense, ask for leniency. They're going to ask probably for more probation time than any prison time. They would probably argue that prison for a police officer is a very dangerous place potentially, and they are going to try and do everything they can, we would think, to keep her out of prison. So, yes, this could go on for some time. You'll recall also that this is the same courtroom where Derek Chauvin was sentenced in the murder of George Floyd some time ago. So there is that as well. The judge has a lot of things to consider. There's a lot of pressure on the judge, on the court system here, to do right by this family.
Ron, does history or precedent give us any indication then of where the judge might go with the sentencing decision?
Again, I think we're in somewhat uncharted waters. Yes, there are all kinds of court precedents, and that's why, again, the prosecution seems to be asking for 7 years, not the full 15 years. And you may remember during the court proceedings, they argue that there are aggravating circumstances that suggested that she should be convicted and sentenced to a even longer term. They have backed away from that argument. It's unclear exactly why. We may hear more of an explanation during the court proceeding. But to some extent, again, this is a very political environment. We know what's been happening in Minneapolis. There was the George Floyd case. Just yesterday, I attended a funeral of Amir Locke, a young man who was shot and killed during this no-knock warrant raid by police just a couple of weeks ago. The trial of the 3 officers who were also charged in George Floyd's death, along with Derek Chauvin, that trial is happening in a federal court in St. Paul, not far from here. So there's a lot going on in this town. The judge, everybody in this is a human being, and they have to be aware of this. And advocates for the family, for Daunte Wright's family, and advocates across the country want a statement in this sentence. And so they are hoping and pushing for the most serious sentence that they can get.
Ron Allen in Minneapolis. Ron, thank you.
This morning, former President Trump is facing another legal defeat. A judge ruled that he and his children, Ivanka and Donald Jr., must answer questions under oath from New York Attorney General Letitia James. She's leading a civil probe into the Trump Organization for possible financial fraud. Joining us now is NBC News national security correspondent Ken Delanian and legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Good morning to both of you. And Ken, I will begin with you. So first, just tell us about this ruling from the judge and this very direct statement we have from him on it, and then also what it means for the New York Attorney General's investigation.
Good morning, Savannah. Yeah, this was a resounding defeat for Donald Trump and his children, no question about it. I sat through listened to most of the 2-hour-plus arguments yesterday. And Judge Arthur Bergeron politely listened to the Trump lawyer contention that this was improper, that the AG should not be able to conduct both a civil investigation and a criminal investigation, that she was compromising the Fifth Amendment rights of Donald Trump and his children by trying to compel them to testify. And what the Trump lawyers wanted is for them to stay the civil case while the criminal case unfolded. The judge listened politely, but in his ruling, he just brought the hammer down. I mean, essentially, he said that this investigation had found what he described as copious evidence of fraud. Copious means a lot, and that she had every right to question these defendants under oath, and that they're perfectly free to assert their Fifth Amendment rights and not answer. You know, of course, the Trumps will appeal, but the judge gave them 21 days to sit for a deposition. That may not hold because of the appeal, but a significant ruling, Savannah.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that statement goes on to say copious evidence of possible financial fraud, and wants to question under oath several of the entities, principals, including its namesake. She has the clear right to do so. So, Danny, I want to bring you in here and talk about what the president's attorney is saying, the former president's attorney, how they're responding, describing it as another politically motivated witch hunt, and saying her client can't get a fair ruling in the state of New York. What legal options do the Trumps have at this point? And does a former president have any special legal protection that then his children maybe wouldn't have under questioning here?
First, in terms of an appeal, they'd essentially be appealing the denial of a stay, and they'd need a stay to appeal that motion for a stay. Not particularly likely, and I think that's why His Honor made this a very short timeline to get everything done. 14 days in which to turn over documents, 21 days in which to appear for depositions. One of the things to think about is in a lot of cases, and I've done this myself, when you have a defendant that may be facing a criminal investigation, as a plaintiff's attorney, you want to wait until the criminal investigation is over because you know that that person will come to a deposition and just take the Fifth Amendment, and you won't get the information that you'd really like to get. But that's not the case here, because for the New York Attorney General, the Trumps taking the Fifth Amendment is a win. That itself is a victory. Now, you asked about any special protections. In reality, other than maybe a stretch of a presidential privilege type argument, which I don't see happening here, no. Once the president leaves office, he's a regular citizen. He can't protect his kids. He can't protect himself, certainly against a state investigation and state subpoena power.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into kind of some of the other investigations going on. So, Ken, we've been talking right now about this civil case, but the Trump organization's also facing a criminal investigation. Now, that one's being led by the Manhattan District Attorney. Could testimony here in this civil case that we're discussing right now, that this judge has just ordered the Trumps must provide, impact that criminal one?
Well, of course it could, Savannah, and that was the heart of the Trumps' argument for why it shouldn't take place. But as Danny would tell you, it's hard to imagine that Donald Trump or his children will actually answer questions in a civil deposition while they're under criminal investigation. It would be madness to do so. In fact, Eric Trump, one of the sons, did sit for a deposition in October 2020, and he took the Fifth Amendment more than 500 times. And I think that's what we can expect from Donald Trump and his children. The thing is, in the civil case, the judge or the jury can draw an adverse inference from their failure to answer questions, and the standard of proof in the civil case is lower. But you're right, the criminal case is the real ballgame here, and let's not forget what the AG and the Manhattan DA is investigating is financial irregularities. The question of whether the Trump organization and members of that organization committed fraud, lied to banks and insurance companies. They've already indicted the CFO, Alan Weisselberg, who has pleaded not guilty, and that investigation continues, and it looks like it's fairly perilous for the former president and his children. Savannah.
And Danny, before I let you both go, let's talk about a separate civil case against the Trump organization. That one's heading to trial later this year about the president's inauguration committee. What should we know about that?
Yeah, it basically is about the misuse of inauguration funds. I don't know the exact date that is coming, that is scheduled for trial, but look for any last-minute delays because the Trump side isn't going to want to go to court on a case like this.
Danny and Ken, with two very similar styles of decorating your live shots. If I need to borrow a peacock pillow, I know who to call. Thank you so much to both of you.
You bet.
As states and cities drop some of their COVID safety protocols, new research is causing concern over the so-called stealth variant. Let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, good to have you with us. So a new study from Japan says this stealth Omicron subvariant could be more harmful than its cousin, Omicron version 1. So what should we know about it? Should we be worried?
So, Joe, we should always worry when we see a variant that can be more infectious than the original Omicron. And this is in animal studies, mind you, as you mentioned, from a Japan pre-peer-reviewed study. So we still have some steps to validate some of that data. But it worries me that we see something more infectious, which we had hints towards. And then there's also the concern that it could evade what we call vaccine-induced immunity or even natural infection-induced immunity. So we've seen that with the original Omicron, that our vaccines get a little less effective, still hold, but a little less. Imagine just even a little less effective with a new variant. Here's the good news. Only about 3.9% of the Omicron sampling in the entire United States is that BA.2 sublineage. But Japan made a recommendation in their paper, which is a reasonable one, that this one, BA.2, is different enough that it deserves its own Greek letter. So we'll see how this unfolds as we're watching it around the country and around the world.
We'll keep an eye on it. Let's talk about Seattle, where the first U.S. case of COVID-19 was confirmed about 2 years ago. The city now going to lift its proof of vaccination requirement for restaurants, theaters, gyms starting March 1st. This is a move that mirrors similar changes we're seeing all around the country. Do you have any worries about lifting these kinds of restrictions right now?
I think my worries about lifting things today in some parts of the country is that the cases have not fallen enough. And the majority of the country is shifting from red or high transmission to kind of moderate. And what we hope to do is wait till we're in that low transmission, according to the CDC. But I think that people are frustrated, so we're all looking for a way out. Here's some flags for concern. You either might be immunocompromised, 12 million people, Joe, who either can't get enough antibodies from vaccines or can't even get the vaccine for medical reasons, or you're under 5, not even eligible. So we really need to now shift and focus to how to make sure they're protected.
Let's talk about folks who are immunocompromised, who are high risk. If you're vaccinated and boosted, what is the best guidance for when and where you should still be wearing a mask? And what will it take? At what point might high-risk Americans be able to return to a more normal life?
Yeah, this is the hardest part of my day job of seeing patients, Joe. Here's my very blunt advice. It's what I give to my patients. First of all, double check and see if you are indeed somebody that should be taking some of these extra precautions. There are patients who clearly know they are, transplant patients, patients undergoing some cancer therapies, patients with certain blood disorders, immune disorders, but some people don't realize they might be susceptible. So talk to your doctor. You can do it virtually if you're nervous about it. Number 2, you should find out if you qualify for what we call a prophylactic monoclonal antibody treatment. What's that? It's a fancy medical way of saying we have monoclonal antibody injections that we can give you in anticipation of you getting infected. You don't need to be infected, but you need to be immunocompromised. It gives you an additional boost to the immunity that you really do need to fight an infection if you get it. And then third, I am telling everyone to wear a high quality mask. And if it's hard for you to do that, I'm okay with you wearing a surgical mask, but still make sure that you're masking and don't try to feel bad or somehow that you did something wrong. This is really to protect yourself.
Helpful advice as always. Dr. Kavita Patel, thanks so much. Have a great weekend. And if you, our viewers, have a question for one of our doctors, let us know. You can email us at morningnewsnow@nbcuni.com with your questions. And please let us know if you want to stay anonymous. Let's get a check now on your Morning News Now weather.
Yeah, that includes a brutal winter storm that's threatening more than 100 million Americans as it sweeps across the eastern half of the country. Bill Cairns joins us with the latest on that track. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So many places had so many issues with this storm, and we're still dealing with it. We just watched severe thunderstorms at 6 a.m. in the morning from Philadelphia to New York City. Very rare for February. Let me show you what happened in Illinois. This was the cold side of the storm. This is where you had problems with temperatures crashing after rain. Then you went over to ice. Then you went over to snow. And these are just semi-trucks that are just littering Interstate 39. That's not a pretty scene there with numerous jackknife tractor trailers and the highway just stuck. So that was kind of the example of the cold side of the storm. We also have a lot of problems with flooding. This map shows you everywhere in maroon or the reddish type color where we have flood warnings. All of western New York, the southern half of Indiana. We have a lot of river flooding that's ongoing. We have a lot of standing water. And now the temperatures are crashing. So now the water's refreezing. So we just got numerous travel issues throughout the Ohio Valley in western New York from all that standing water. And now the cold temperatures moving in. That squall line that did have some severe weather with it yesterday has weakened. Just some rain heading for you in Savannah and Charleston early this morning. It's raining right now in Wilmington. And it looks like we've just cleared it out in areas of the mid-Atlantic. Temperatures are going to crash, though. We're still at 60 degrees in Philadelphia. Look back to the west in Detroit, 12 degrees. That's almost 50 degrees colder in Detroit right now than it is in Philadelphia. So enjoy that early morning warmth in Hartford, Montauk, and Boston. I know it's very windy, too, because that's going to get much colder as we go throughout the day. As far as the wind alerts go, we still have about 78 million people under some sort of wind alerts or high wind warnings. The strongest of the winds are in coastal areas of New England and also right around the Jersey Shore and the Maryland coast. We could expect gusts this morning up to 50 to 60 miles per hour. So if you're driving on those tall bridges, grab the steering wheel with two hands, and we'll have significant delays at the airports this morning in the Northeast. So the forecast, no issues really in the southern half of the country. It's still, though, cold and windy, the Great Lakes, and then we'll see some of those changes in the Northeast today. We'll talk about that weekend forecast coming up, and it looks a lot quieter than what we just got done with.
Good. Hopefully you can have a quiet weekend, Bill.
Exactly. All right, good.
Okay.
We'll look for that next hour.
Thank you.
Be nice.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.